Hello, everybody. We got a special guest today, Tim McDonald, whose people reached out to my people. I don't have people. He has people, and solicited an interview. Tim's got a really cool story, scary but cool. At least the outcome was, and I'm gonna let him tell that. But I was intrigued to have this conversation for several reasons that will become apparent throughout the course of it. And in the meantime, I'm going to let him introduce himself to y'all. So, Tim, if you would please let everybody know who you are and where you are and what you are doing here.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Jake. My name is Tim McDonald. I am coming from Tampa, Florida, and I am a stage four colon cancer survivor and living donor liver transplant recipient. Married, have two grandkids, work in community management, and have done some speaking and really got into advocacy after as soon as I was diagnosed with colon cancer, even though I didn't call it advocacy at the time. It was more just sharing my story, creating awareness so other people didn't have to go through what knew I was about to go through with chemo and just creating awareness. But then that turned into the advocacy and getting involved in a couple organizations and meeting so many other people that really helped drive, you know, uh, me to get inspired to do even more.
I like hearing people's stories when they have very specific or very precise experiences with something that generally don't hit I guess you could say the metaphorical windshield of the public uh, radar, so to speak. Colorectal cancer is, I think, something that's parked in the back of people's minds because there's other organizations that do a very good job of advertising different types of cancers and different types of activist, modalities and routes and so forth. So we don't hear too much about this, but it's quite serious. And I do want to get into the advocacy because you breezed over something right there about, you were merely telling your story, but to you that is the advocacy portion of it, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what I'm curious about is this journey. Like, first of all, what were you doing for work before this all hit? Because now you've got a different angle. What was your life like until 2020 or whenever you got the diagnosis, and then how did it shift from there?
Yeah, well, I had been doing community management for about a decade. I kind of took a step back and was out of work for a little bit, and then got into doing something that my wife had been doing since the beginning of eBay, which was selling e-commerce. And we had a pretty decent business. I did have another job as a director of membership for a trade association, although I really felt like it was not the right place for me. And I had decided to leave on my own about a year after I was there. And that just coincided with the beginning of the pandemic. But I was leaving to really focus on starting up speaking as a business for myself. And that was what happened, COVID, right after I had a talk down in the Cancun area to a whole bunch of IT professionals. And then I just started podcasting about speaking and how people got started in it, how they were transitioning through the COVID period
Yeah, yeah.
and everything else. So that was kind of my life beforehand. But my wife and I really tried to make the pandemic the best that we could. You know, I always said that I never want to be in business with my partner. And then I got stuck in the house with her, and you heard all these horror stories about domestic violence and everything.
Yeah.
Her and I actually became closer, and now I would have a totally different answer if you asked me that. I said, yes, I could work with her all the time and stay in the same house with her all the time. But we were just doing some fun stuff, we still got dressed up. You know, Kentucky Derby just recently happened. I remember that was during COVID, and we actually all got dressed up. We made cocktails. We, had some appetizers, and I had it on TV, and we're betting online and just having a good time with it. We'd have date nights where we'd go out and dance on our back patio and play some music. Hire a musician to come in online and play for us that was at the local restaurant that we always used to go to. So it was just like having fun like that. But then towards November is when I started feeling a little bit something was off, and Thanksgiving got a major pain in my side. And that was kind of what drove me to go to the ER and get diagnosed with the stage 4 colon cancer.
That's wild. So you're obviously pushing for screenings now, and part of what you've covered is that, we've moved the I guess the suggested age from 50 down to 45, and I'm 47. I'll be 48 this year, and so it's like, oh, I should probably go do that. Um,
Yes, you
but
should.
you
And I
were
wouldn't
you
be doing
were
my job if I didn't tell
yeah,
you,
right.
yes, you
Yes, yes.
should.
Thank you. And I will be a data point in your collection. But you were how old when you got this diagnosis?
I was diagnosed at 52. The age was still 50 back then, but the last time I saw my doctor on a regular basis was right before I turned 50. And she just said, well, we'll just get you next time you come in. And then I didn't go the next year because I didn't have insurance. And then COVID hit, and that kind of put
Right.
the brakes on everything. So I wasn't too far behind, but that's the difference that 2 years can make. And I'm not one that goes back and tries to figure out, oh, if I
Right,
would
right.
have insisted, I would have been saved. I don't live my life that way. I always look at things like we can't change what happened in the past. We can only deal with what's in front of us today, right now.
Yeah, it's very wise. I'm curious more about the unfolding or the metastatic nature of it, and if you can give our audience some sense of like, okay, it's Thanksgiving, you got a pain in your side. If most of us, and if I'm a dude representing dudes the way that I think I do, then we go, must be some gas, right? Or something like that. We don't immediately pull the I must go to the doctor lever, let alone the let's check for cancer lever.
Well,
So how did that unfold for you, and why was this like such a watershed moment?
yeah, I'm only laughing because I was a typical guy. Um, I
Okay.
remember my wife telling me I should go to the urgent care, which we have one that I can walk to in my neighborhood,
Mm,
and I just said, yeah, let's just give it the weekend, see if it gets better,
sure. Sure.
And then Saturday or Friday, I woke up. You still got it? Yeah, it's a little bit worse. Why don't you go? I'll just wait until Monday. And then Saturday, same thing. Sunday, she got up. I said, I made an appointment because you need an appointment to go at that point in time during COVID. And she goes, I thought you were waiting until tomorrow. And I said, it just got too bad. I needed to go and have them tell me what's going on. And I didn't have any idea it was cancer. I remember we were actually, and they actually mentioned this when I went in urgent care, it could have been a kidney stone.
Mm,
They weren't sure. They weren't they didn't really have any concerns with any kind of internal bleeding or anything major that immediately could be identified, but they really just didn't know what it was, and the only thing that they could think of was maybe a kidney stone. So that was kind of in the forehead of my thinking, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And when I got home from visiting there, and they had told me that they had put in an order for a CT scan to determine what else was going on, or what it was that was going on. And I got that scheduled for Monday morning, went in, came home again. I could walk to that one too. Got home, and I remember them telling me, just, we will not call you. Whoever ordered it is going to be the one who calls you to give you the results. And I just remember being in the house with my wife and getting the call from urgent care asking if I could come in. And as I was walking out the door to go there, I was joking with my wife saying, I guess it's not as simple as them ordering a prescription to kill the kidney stone off in my in my system,
Yeah.
And that was how I left, just like kind of joking like that. And then I get there and I knew something was up because, any doctor you go into, you got to go to registration, fill out some forms, sit down, wait, they call you back. I walked in, they said, Mr. McDonald? And I said, yes. And they brought me right back to the room. And about 2 seconds later, the doctor came in with a white piece of paper. And I knew something was not good when that situation unfolded in front of me. Um, but really, the first thing he said was, you have cancer. And I just said, okay, what do we need to do? I was really matter of fact like that because, again, I mean, I fully believed that nothing I could do would change what I just heard. So it was just like, okay, what do we need to do next? And he knew my situation. He was kind of my de facto kind of primary care doctor because I typically saw him once a year.
Hmm.
Going there whenever like I had a, I thought I might have, strep throat. Thought I might have COVID, thought I might, have sprained or broken my foot or something like that. I'd always see him, and that typically was about once a year. So he knew me enough to know me that I didn't have insurance and that I didn't really have a primary doctor. And so when he answered that question, his next with the question, which was, "Do you mind driving a little bit to go see somebody?" And I said, "No, not at all. Why?" And he goes, "Well, I used to work with a GI surgeon down in St. Pete, which is, about a 45-minute drive for me. Um, but I can call him and see if I can get him to see you today." And he did. I got in
Wow.
there that day. Um, I got the colonoscopy scheduled for 3 days later. It was during COVID, so I needed to get that COVID test done, where it took 48 hours and they jammed it down the back of your
Of
nasal
course. Of
cavity.
course. Yeah.
I think we all have a memory of that.
Yeah.
And then I got my colonoscopy. He put a stent in because the colon in my or the tumor in my colon was so big that it was almost completely blocking my colon, and I wasn't going to
Wow.
be able to naturally pass anything. So they put a stent in, and did a biopsy. At the time, I didn't realize this. I didn't realize this until months later, but they actually did the biopsy, which measured by biomarkers of my tumor, which is very important for people, and something I know very well today, but I knew nothing about then, which basically means that each of us, just like our hair is different, our eye color is different, our personalities are different, our tumors are different too, the biology of them. And so when your oncologist knows this, it's really good to be able to specify a treatment that they feel is going to work best with your particular type of cancer, not just broad range, but your biomarkers of your cancer. So this GI surgeon did all that. So I really got to, even though I only saw him like twice in my life, that office visit, and then after I had the colonoscopy, I really credit him for doing a lot that I had no idea I needed, but he got it taken care of for me. So, and then it was just getting into an oncologist and starting treatment. And eventually I got into a major cancer center here in Tampa, because I needed to get insurance in order to get there. But that
Mm.
was, and I always responded well to chemo. Even after the first infusion I got, that stent that they put in my colon, I naturally passed it. And I just
The
remember
whole tumor
freaking
came
out.
out?
Well, not the tumor. It's like
Uh,
the stent is like a little like
it
four
widens it,
inch
right?
long screen almost,
Yeah.
and it's a tube. And
Yeah.
so it just like imagine like a flexible tube that they put in your
Yeah.
colon and it keeps it open. And
Okay.
that's
Okay.
what
It
it
went
was.
around the tumor. Got it. Got it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I called the very first oncologist that I had that I respected and liked and said, "Hey, I think something might be wrong. Is this okay? Here's what happened." And he goes, "It's very encouraging. It means probably the tumor shrunk enough for that to naturally pass. We typically don't see that happen, and we certainly typically don't see that happen after your first infusion. So this is a very good sign." So I just always was under the impression that I didn't need to wait for a scan. I felt like I was having good results right away.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long did the whole process take from late November when you discovered it to you're clear, good to go, ring the bell?
Well, that was the only reason why I got to ring the bell wasn't because I was clear. It was because I decided about 6 months into my treatment that I was going to pursue a living donor liver transplant. And
Mm.
that meant that I needed to continue on treatment until we had a donor for me to get the transplant. And during that process, I needed to get like, my primary tumor removed, which meant a colon resection, and you take a little break from chemo for surgeries. I needed to get a fine needle biopsy of a lymph node that they saw on a CT scan just to make sure The transplant team wants to make 100% sure to the best of their ability that you have no other cancer in your body
Right.
outside of your liver when they do the
Okay.
transplant. So I did all that stuff, but it was basically I got the call for a donor in April of 23. So I was 2.5 years on chemo.
Jeez.
And right after I got the call, I did one more round of chemo because there was a sweet spot that they say you want at least like 4 weeks off of chemo before a major surgery, but you don't want more than six. And I was at 7 weeks. So they just said, okay, let's just do one more round of chemo, my oncology team. And so when I went in for that round of chemo, I knew I got to ring the bell then because it was going to be my last chemo session. And my nurses at my cancer center in Tampa here, the infusion nurses were amazing. And I think everybody on that floor, because I went to one of their satellite offices that was closer to my house, I think every nurse on that floor came out when I rang the bell. It was like there was 20 of them around me when I rang the bell. And I recorded a little video. They took pictures of it. My wife had had COVID during that time, so she wasn't allowed to come in at first, but then the last year she could come. But she asked me if I wanted her to come, and I just got so used to going on my own. I'm like, it's kind of my own like alone time, so I'm like, just let me go. But I did invite her to come to that, and then she got COVID and she couldn't come to watch me ring the bell. But that was kind of the magic day. And to be honest, I never really knew if I wanted to ring the bell or not, even if I knew. But as I got more into this, I started realizing like just how much patients that are able to ring the bell, patients that continue to show up even if they're not in active treatment, are true inspirations for those who are still going through treatment. And if I didn't do those things, I wouldn't be able to inspire some other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, okay. So this being a mental health podcast, I love all that, and I want to hear more. I do want to ask though, because the way you laid this out, oh, let me back up. So the way you laid this out is you kind of have a smile on your face for the listening audience. It's kind of like, yeah, yeah, I went through this tough thing and yep, I'm here now, right? And most people don't respond that way. Well, most people respond with panic and fear and deep sorrow. They're anxietizing about things that haven't happened yet. It sounds to me, and please correct me if this isn't the story. It sounds to me like you faced it pragmatically, but knowing what I know about human beings, it probably wasn't all that pragmatic, right? So,
No.
like, help me understand some of the fear that you experienced, some of the stuff that you went through. I mean, you're 52. I don't know if you had grandkids at that point or not, but I ain't exactly that far away from that age, and I can't imagine something like that hitting me and taking me out of the loop for 2.5, 3 years. Because chemo isn't fun either. I mean, it doesn't matter how well it works. It's just not a fun ride.
No.
So help us understand what that was like. Like, what was it? What was the impact on your family and your own psyche? And uh, at any point, did you give up hope? Like just lay it out.
Yeah, so from a mental aspect, I really didn't feel like I was literally when I was diagnosed in a very healthy mental state. I had
That
done
helps. That helps.
a decade of mindfulness, consciousness, just being aware of my inner workings and what I need to work on personally that have nothing to do with external forces, just me. And I was doing all this for a decade and doing that work. And that's why I tell people all the time when they have that reaction about like, how could you have been laughing during this time? How can you smile about this? And it's like because I literally was during that time. That's how it was for me, because that's how I just dealt with it. It was just like everything else in life. I like to look at things as half full instead of half empty, and so let's just approach it this way. It hasn't steered me wrong in my life, and I don't want it to start changing things now. But I will say that um, you know some of the times when you're going through chemo, it not only kills the cancer cells, but it also makes some other major changes in your bodies. You know, it kills your good cells too, right? In addition to your bad cells.
Sure.
And it affects your mind, it affects your hearing, it affects your eyes, it affects your teeth, you know, everything in your body, you know, your
Yeah, it's
veins,
poison.
everything.
Yeah.
And so, you know, especially when I was going through the infusion period, you know, there were times where I was just not a pleasant person to be around, and I knew it, you know. But here I am stuck in the house with my wife, who's also my caregiver, trying to do everything for me. She started, you know, I've always taken out the garbage. I did the laundry. I did all, you know, all this stuff. Now she was doing almost everything in the house, you know, and she was cooking meals. She was counting the protein that I was getting to make sure that I was getting enough protein while I, you know, two things that they say when you're on chemo, you need the protein and you need your fluids, you know, to stay hydrated. And she was making sure that I got what I needed to get after we talked to a nutritionalist. And but the one thing that I couldn't do was really just express myself in a way that wouldn't be hurtful to her, but I needed to get it out of my system. One thing I've learned about me, because I did suffer from depression earlier in my life during my first marriage, and one of the things that I came to learn about myself was that holding emotions inside is not healthy for me.
Right.
Um, and so, because I just let them bottle up to a point where I just explode like a cork on a champagne bottle, you know, and that is not a pleasant person to be around. I know that about myself. I don't want my wife to be exposed to that. And so, there were times where I blew up at her, but thankfully, the first kind of support group that I really got involved with was called Man Up to Cancer. And they're for any man impacted by any type of cancer. And they don't talk about treatments or anything. They more talk about like what we go through as men, both emotionally, financially, spiritually through this journey and how, how we can deal with that, you know. And for me, that just was like the outlet that I needed to be able to express however I was feeling, whatever thoughts were going on through my head that I knew I couldn't share with my wife because she would not take them the right way. She would take them like I was attacking her, even though it had nothing to do with that. And so that became kind of my outlet. And really what I found was, you know, I never got judged, you know, by sharing any of this. And which was so different than like when I have conversations with my wife, right? Like sometimes I feel like I'm being judged. And with these guys, it's just like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been through that myself. And, you know, I did talk with a social worker at my cancer center later, and he explained that that was called, I believe the term he used was normalization. Basically,
Yeah.
you feel like you're alone going through this, and then once you share it with somebody else and they confirm that they've been through something similar, you feel like you're a little bit normal now because you're not alone on this island. You actually are with other people who have experienced something very similar.
Yo, did you freeze? Uh-oh.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. You're
oh
good.
yeah.
You're back.
That was just the healthiest thing for me, having this outlet to be able to go and not get judged,
Yeah.
and share. And that was like helped me through the infusions. But then I got to like searching for a living donor for to be my liver donor.
Yeah, tell me
And
about that. What's that like?
that was like an emotional roller coaster. I thought I was good, you know, emotionally, mentally. Man, when it got to looking for a donor, it was like, you know, you'd start off and you're on a high because you feel like people are calling, but with HIPAA restrictions and privacy laws, the hospital doesn't tell you anything. They don't tell you how many people called, they can't tell you who called, they can't tell you what stage you're at. So me trying to be the person that I am, tried to control as much as I could of that. And so if you told me you were calling for me, and you said, "Hey, Tim, I got this done. I got my labs done. I talked to them. They said that they're going to follow up with me on Monday, but here it is Friday and I haven't heard anything." I can now call them and say, hey, you know what? Jake called and, got his blood work done and said that you were supposed to call him on Monday, but he never heard anything from you and it's Friday now. Would you at least please make sure you call Jake and let him know what's going on? That's how I was controlling it or trying to control it.
Yeah.
But the more this happened, I would get my hopes up, right? And I'd start getting my hopes up, and then they wouldn't, they just never move forward, or I wouldn't hear from them again. And all of a sudden, I'd have this really deep letdown of like, man, I thought I was so close, and here I got nothing again. I'm back at the bottom, right? And it's like this continual up and down, up and down. And then finally, I think it was in December, I had this girl who was going to donate to her dad, and she wasn't a good match. He was in a similar situation to me, but she wasn't a good match for him, but she could have been a good match for me. And it was just like all the wheels were going. It happened so quick because she already had all her workup done. She just sent that up to my doctor. And then again, that just fell through. And, I thought about it and I started thinking to myself, I'm like, maybe what's happening here, Tim, is you're getting too attached to the story of what these donors could be to you, and you're trying to control it too much. What about if you just step back and just let it happen and see what happens? And in January, I had another lady who called. She lived up in Rochester where I got my transplant done. So she got all the things done right away in 2 days, all the evaluations. I think she was a perfect match. I think she was a good to go. And she was so responsive to me the whole time. And then we were on vacation, my wife and I, and it was the time that she was supposed to get back in touch with me and let me know if she was a go or not. And I didn't hear anything. And my wife said, "Are you going to message her and see if what happened?" And I said, "You know what? We're on vacation. I'll wait until I get back." I got back. I waited like another week because I didn't want to be pestering her. And I just messaged her and I said, "Hey, I figured I would have heard from you, what's going on?" And she basically said, "I'm so glad you wrote to me. I just didn't know how to tell you, but I had a change of heart."
Oh,
And I was crushed, but that crush feeling that typically lasted like a week or two before only lasted a couple hours this time. It was truly like because in that month, I had made that decision that I was not going to get all worked up and try and control all this. I was going to let it flow. And if I was going to let it flow, that meant that the disappointments needed to flow too. And so I just let that flow and I recovered. But then came February, the end of February, and now I haven't heard anything anymore about
this
like
is now what, 2024?
23 of
23. Okay.
23. And I'm like sitting there going, okay, well, nothing's happening. I've already had some major disappointments here lately. Chemo has, most people will say it has a cumulative effect, meaning the side effects, even if they're not bad at the beginning, over time, they seem to gradually increase. And it's kind of like I compare it to, I know you talked about grandkids, and I do have two grandkids now. One was born right before I was diagnosed, but I kind of equate it to when you don't see your grandkids for months on end and then you see them again, they got so big, right? And it's kind
Yeah.
of like, that's kind of, I lived it. So these effects didn't feel like they were happening like, in major steps. But if I looked at how I was at the end compared to how I was at the beginning, it was a major change in the side effects that I was experiencing. And it was just draining on me. I mean, physically, emotionally, I mean, it was just, I was like a shell of a person, I felt like with the chemo. And I just remember thinking to myself, maybe for as much as I believe in a liver transplant, maybe I can find somebody just to do a resection on me and I can be done with chemo for a while. It might not be forever, but maybe I can be done with chemo for a while. And I did find a surgeon here in Tampa who said he could do a resection. But then I told because I'm a big believer that I want to let my teams know what I'm thinking and what I'm going through. And so I talked to my transplant surgeon about this, And he presented me some studies showing like the success rates and chances of recurrence for transplant patients versus resected patients. And it's much better your odds of not only lower chance of recurrence, but also longer lifespan if you get a transplant over a
Wow.
resection. And so he just told me at that point in time, I told him I was going to give it 2 more months, and then I would probably make a decision to get a resection if we didn't have a donor. And he just told me, I think we're really close on something, just hang in there a little bit longer. And that was like within a couple weeks, I got a call from them telling me I had the donor.
Great.
And it was an amazing feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So you walk through this process, you get through it. Did you meet your donor, by the way?
I did. I'm like very connected. I mean, it probably has something to do with what I do for a living, being an
Yeah.
online community manager, and I connect people together. I
Sure.
kind of knew a guy up in Rochester, New York, who was just pursuing a liver transplant when I met him, and was getting it at the same place I was, and he had saw that I posted that I had a donor and texted me and congratulated me and said, "Do you know when you're getting it? I think I know who your donor might be." And I said, "Yeah, here's the date." And then he said, "Do you want to know who it is?" And I said, "Only if they want to know." And long story short is 5 minutes later, I get her Facebook profile. And I message her. She messaged me right back. We set up a time to Zoom, and we were on a Zoom for like 2.5 hours. Um,
Wow.
and just hit it off. I went up there for my pre-op evaluation, but I needed to get a colonoscopy and stay up there for 2 extra days before I flew home for the weekend and came up with my wife. And she let me stay at her house with her and her husband. She drove me to my colonoscopy. I mean, this woman is just an absolute angel. She is like so amazing. And we stay in touch all the time. Her and her husband are actually just moving down to Georgia. So I just saw that on Facebook and I called her on it. I said, "Hey, you're going to be a lot closer to me now." And she's like, "Yeah, now we can drive to see each other instead of fly."
Wow, what a cool story. That's really amazing. So you go through this and then you launch into advocacy, which is not really a launching given what you'd been doing prior, but talk to me about that and what was the inspiration and the catalyst for that, and we'll get into what keeps you going too, but talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, well, during treatment, I got involved with Fight CRC as an ambassador, which basically for a year you're featured, you're highlighted, they connect you with media, so you get to share your story, create awareness. But they also do call on Congress and they also do fundraising. And I did call on Congress and I love doing legislative advocacy. I absolutely love it. And I remember being there one year and talking to somebody because they also have this research advocacy program. And I wanted to get involved in that, but it wasn't until after my transplant that I got called for the research advocacy thing. And so then I started getting in with research advocacy, and I thought it was not going to be for me. I don't have a science background. I'm not a researcher by trade. But what I learned is after building this up in my mind about like how I wasn't qualified for to do this, I quickly realized that all this anxiety that I created for myself was really for nothing because they don't want me to come in and be the researcher. They want me to come in as a patient. They want me to tell them from my perspective as a patient how this research proposal how I view it. What are the
Yeah.
drawbacks to it? What are some of the hiccups that we might encounter? And that's kind of like all of a sudden I'm like, why did I spend all this time in my mind wasting about like I wasn't going to do a good enough job. I wasn't qualified for this. I didn't deserve to be here. When the reality was, this is exactly where I need to be. This is exactly what I need to be doing. And and as soon as I did that and had that realization, I started really diving into research advocacy. I still doubled up on the legislative advocacy, and I started getting opportunities where I'd get asked to go to conferences and work tables and be at events. And I keep meeting all these other advocates, and I'm good at even in person. Like I can just go up to somebody and start asking, talking to them and find out their story, and then say, like this one lady I know I met in December at an event down in Miami, and I told her about the Cologuard Classic for colon cancer people, and I told her about Colon Congress with Fight CRC. She did both of them this year, you know? And
Nice.
so it was great to see people like actually that I meet start getting more involved in some of these other things. But so many people started coming up to me and saying, you know, Tim, how I want to get more involved like you. How do you get these opportunities? And, you know, I started having this realization many years ago that when somebody asks you the same thing 3 times, it's probably a good idea to write it down. Because once you write it down, it takes you maybe a few minutes to put a blog post together. But then when somebody asks, instead of taking 15 minutes to explain it to them, you just send them a link.
Yep.
And now you
Yep.
just do that all the time. But I knew with this advocacy thing, it was going to be way more than a simple blog post, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think it would have been too efficient for me to send 50 links because I don't think anybody would have read all 50. So I decided that, you know, it was time. I was going to write a book about it. And, you know, to be honest with you, looking back on it today, and I have actually written about this not that long ago, but I really feel like during my treatment, during my survivorship. And as I get more into survivorship, I'm realizing the mental toll that it takes is even worse than I think going through treatment, you know? But having a purpose and having meaning to what you're doing helps you have better health outcomes. And so that's why I think I love doing the advocacy. But I think the mental challenge for me now, and this is another thing I've written about too, not that long ago, is, you know, professionals have and training for compassion fatigue, right? Like they are trained and part of their continuing education on how to deal with loss, how to deal with grief, how to deal with everything for their patients.
Yeah.
Advocates don't
Don't.
have the luxury of getting that because every time that we're working with somebody else, we are opening up our own wounds,
Yes. Yes.
our own history, our own experiences. And, you know, for me, that was a real struggle. I mean, especially in the first year. I'm getting a little bit better at it now. And I think what's really focused for me is I used to feel like I needed to carry the weight of all these people that I met and come in contact with and now lost. I needed to carry the weight on my shoulders. And the reality of the matter is that's dragging me down. That's holding me back. And I know they wouldn't want that. So I've just kind of reframed another way of looking at this where I take the weight off the back and I put their flame on my torch. And
Yes.
I hold that out in front of me and I let them light the way for where I'm heading. And now I
Yes.
can see further, I can see clearer, and I'm making a greater impact by doing that.
I
And I
love
think
that metaphor.
it's so simple to say, and I know it's much more difficult to do, but I think that that process is still ongoing internally with me, but it's helped me so much in the past year start to not have those really down times when I lose somebody, you
Yeah.
know, not have those really down times when I start thinking of somebody that I've lost in the last year or two. And that to me is like it's so powerful, but it's a message that I want to share with others because we need more advocates. We don't need more people backing away from advocacy because the grief is too much for them.
Right. Right. Yeah. One of those things is it. I don't particularly care for the term compassion fatigue. I think it's misused and misapplied. It originated in nursing because, like what you described, they don't get taught in nursing school to leave work at work. They don't get taught to have good mental boundaries with the tales of war, you know, horror and woe that they see. We do, allegedly. But then our people, my profession, adopted that and hijacked that phrase. And they're like, we have compassion fatigue too. I'm like, no, you have bad boundaries. Like you're carrying everybody's crap that you're not supposed to carry. That's supposed to leave work at work, right? So it's understandable how people who aren't specifically trained to deal with this can incur such a burden. And that goes from, frontline responders like cops and EMS to doctors to attorneys to, prosecutors, whatever. Um, and now advocates, right? Whenever you encounter pain and you don't know how to quantify it, box it up, label it, and set it aside, make sure it's not yours, what do you do with it, right? It's hard to just leave it there and forget. That's why I love the metaphor. You convert it into something that's illuminating and inspiring and propelling forward. It's a great the torch analogy is amazing. Um, and I think a lot of us can stand to hear that because we want to move forward and make change and create fundamental ripples across systems. My question to you is not just what keeps you going, because we all want to make sure that people live long, happy, fulfilling lives and not die early. Um, what does the advocacy look like for you? How do you know? And I know you address this, so I'm purposely teeing it up because I want to ask another question. But what's your goal, I guess? How will you know when you quote unquote arrive?
Um, Well, I think that's important right there, is I don't think there's a place where I'm going to arrive.
Right, right, right.
Because I think too many of us do that, and when we don't arrive at that destination, we think we fail. And
Correct, correct. Yeah,
so for me, it's kind of I would say kind of my guiding light, right? Like where am I heading to? What do I want to see happen, right? And I want to, above anything, I love legislative and research advocacy, like I mentioned. But above that, I love inspiring others to become advocates. I love helping them navigate through some of the challenges, some of the roadblocks, where to get started, how to identify what you're passionate about, because we're all passionate about different things. And kind of looking at how we can take that and bring more people to the table, right? And I just I really love that aspect of advocacy. And I think that for me, it's really and I'm sorry if I'm not going where you wanted to go.
no, you're good. You're good.
Um,
I'm a
but
professional question asker, as it turns out, so I
yeah.
can go where you go.
But I mean, I really feel like for me, I love talking with recently diagnosed patients because those are the patients that haven't set preconceived notions of what they have or have not to be with
Right.
their diagnosis yet, right? Like they're still in that discovery stage. And if I can set them up to have kind of that, you know, hey, this is not all doom and gloom. It's not all over for you. You can do something positive and talk to them about some of these opportunities, not telling them how to do it or what to do, but just presenting some of the opportunities that are there. I all of a sudden give them an opportunity to see that there is something with meaning and belief that they can jump into, and if they want, that can be helpful to their condition and their health
Um,
and how what their outcome's going to be. And that to me is like the most important thing about what I do in my work is making sure that other people don't have to go through what I went through and what so many other people went through.
I love that. A lot of people wrap their arms around activism, and to me, activism is just misplaced emotional energy. Usually anger, right? They're usually angry at something, so they become activated. But advocacy, or to borrow a friend's term, actionism, is the verb of making measurable progress in a certain area. It's not just, ranting and raving with a picket sign down by the courthouse. It's
Yep.
doing something that requires effort and sacrifice. And one of the things that you talk about in your book is how you measure your own impact. And I think it's great that you use the anecdotal evidences of individuals who come back and testify. They say, I got screened, right? Or because I got screened, I'm still here today. I might have died. Saving lives matters. And if there's dozens or a handful or whatever, I think that matters. And I think what frustrates me greatly, because I do a lot of work, the listening audience usually knows this unless they're brand new, but I do a lot of work in the firearms community between firearms and mental health and suicide prevention. And a lot of times we'll go out and ask for support in some form or another, usually financially because things cost money. And sometimes they'll say, well, where are your data that show that free and anonymous mental health screenings work? It's like, you want me to prove how many lives weren't taken? Like, and so what Mike Sodini, the founder of this organization I'm a part of, says oftentimes, he says, don't let data get in the way of saving a life. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And you're doing the same thing. It's like, we don't need big sums of literature to prove that doing the right thing is the right thing to do. And I love that you allow yourself to rely on your own anecdotal results to continue propelling you, like the one-on-one conversations with the newly diagnosed. I think that's beautiful. And something else you do beautifully in your book, I thought, was you delineate the value among advocate, volunteer, foundation, creator, all the things that matter that fold into the work as a whole. You just happen to center on advocacy because it's your thing, but you're not throwing out all the other ones, right? You're not chucking them under the bus. And I think that it's really important to know that it's okay to have a lane, right? You don't have to do all things and cast the net so wide to be, you know, saying yes to everything because then you burn out and you don't know how your impact is even taking effect. So it's really great that you're doing that. I would like to though to bring this back to like I've got this printed out here. I'm going to read it word for word. It's really early in the book actually. You're talking about people say, Tim, does this really matter? Isn't it all just helping people? It's like, yes, it all is just helping people, but the distinction matters. And you say, when you understand yourself as an advocate rather than a volunteer, you operate from a place of expertise and authority. And this is why I love, because my profession, I think too far, we swung the pendulum to teaching us that we just stay out of the way and we don't matter. It's like, you're not the expert. It's like, well, then why are they paying us? But you go on and you say, you're not grateful for the seat at the table. You know you belong there because you bring irreplaceable perspective. You're not hoping someone listens to your ideas. You're expecting that they will, and you're prepared to push back when they don't. You're not supplementing an organization's work, you're fundamentally shaping it. I love that. That inspires me because I'm like, yeah, right on, man. I do deserve to be here. I do bring something. I do contribute. I do matter. Uh, how did you land on that? Because that's a pretty vociferous assertion to make, especially when you're exhorting others to follow, right? It's hard to come forward and be like, I matter here, invite me. And if you don't, woe be it to you, right?
I wasn't always that way, and I certainly wasn't that
I
way when
believe
I
it.
first started my advocacy. But I've been around some people who have been in advocacy for over a decade now. I've had a lot of one-on-one conversations with them, and I've really just taken a step back and looked at the whole picture. And I'm seeing th places that are doing it right, and I'm seeing places that are doing it wrong. And I think that, you know, as somebody who was brought up by my parents, by my schooling, by the past jobs I've had, to always respect authority, to listen to what somebody above you has to say to you and follow that, I've learned is really something that man made up, and there's no reason why I can't change that. And I don't need to change everybody, but I can change it in my lane where I am. And it starts with me changing it because if I just tell other people to change it, I'm not being true to myself and my words. So I need to change how I look at myself when I go into these situations and be the inspiration, the example for others who get into it. And it is not always easy to do, but I am getting much better at it. And I think it's so important because, I mean, just the word volunteer to me. I mean, first of all, it feels like you want me to do something, right? Like when I'm volunteering for you, you need to tell me what to do. That's not what an advocate is. The advocate creates the action. They
Hmm.
don't wait to be told what to do. And I think that's so important because otherwise we have a bunch of people sitting on their hands waiting for somebody else to make the decision when the reality is the patients, the advocates that are doing this work are the ones who are making the decisions. We have that lived experience. And I know that there's a lot of, and I have a marketing background with my professional work. So I'm like, I know a lot of these organizations are starting to call it like instead of patient centered, it's patient partners and all this stuff. But I mean, that to me is like good language that you can put on a marketing sheet. It's
Yep.
not showing me what you're doing. I
Yep.
want to see the proof. I don't want to just hear the words.
Yep.
And I think that's what I'm trying to get across by saying that. And I can only have written that if I actually have been on both sides of that, right? Because if I wasn't, I'd only be seeing one side of it.
Yep. Yeah. So what are the next steps? By the way, the book is called From Patient to Advocate, authored by Tim McDonald. Um, what are the next steps for you from here? Because I want to be mindful of time. We promised an hour. We will commit to an hour. Um, you're going to keep it moving. Is there something to augment? I mean, this kind of goes back to the goal setting. It's like, what is the goal? How do you know when you get there? I know that in something like healthcare, there's always going to be sick people. So there's always going to be somebody to advocate for. What's the next steps and how do you convince people to continue following in this what could appear to be a treadmill?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the next steps are just to really lean in on I'm on two patient advisory councils for organizations that are not cancer specific, actually. One's with the Hematology Oncology Pharmacy Association, and one is with PAN Foundation, which is affordable and accessible healthcare for people with chronic diseases. So
Great.
it really is a little bit broader than just the space I'm in. But I really want to focus in on the work that I do with them. I'm also going to be very conscious of the new research programs that I get involved with and making sure that I truly feel like my voice is making a difference in those, and not just participating in any one that comes my way like I used to in the early days.
I think we all
Um,
used to do that. Then we wake up, we're
but
like, this is worthless.
I remember the first time I got like $120, Amazon gift card. I thought it was the best thing, and now it's like, okay, I don't, it's nice, but I don't absolutely need to do this. It's not bringing me closer to where I need to go. But the reality is, I would love, and I don't know what this looks like, probably intentionally, but I really want to get to a place where I don't need to worry about doing any other work outside of doing advocacy. That is ideally where I can see myself going at some point down the road, because that will mean that I am making an impact to get more people involved in advocacy, and that
Yeah.
to me is the win. And maybe that, and I do allude to this at the very end of the book, but maybe the pipe dream is, right? Like that we all come together as advocates because it is kind of your own thing. You're not like, you might work for this pharma company, this organization, this on certain projects, but you're not employed by any. So you don't have health insurance and you don't have a steady income with other benefits. And maybe we create like an advocates union, right? Where advocates can all come together and be compensated fairly, can
Yeah.
be get benefits that you might not normally be able to get, and make it so that more people can do advocacy work and not have to worry about all the other things that you probably need if you have a chronic disease and need to become an advocate.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I certainly appreciate your time and the delay. The listening audience doesn't know this, but we had originally scheduled for a week ago, but then disaster struck my life, and I was like, I'm not in the headspace to do this, so we postponed. So thank you for being flexible. Thanks for doing the work because God forbid I ever need it, but it's nice to know that you're out there should I need it. The book, once again, is called From Patient to Advocate, Turning Survivorship into Impact, a Healthcare Advocate's Guide by Tim McDonald. Where can people reach you, sir?
You can get me at advocacyatwork.com, which is where my podcast and blog is. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just Tim A. McDonald on LinkedIn is where you can get me there.
Awesome. Anything else for our people before we cut you loose?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I've just come to learn, and it's one little practice that I do every time I start getting stressed out about anything or obsessing about one particular topic. It's really about like for me just starting to ask myself the question, am I going to be thinking about this 10 minutes from now? Am I going to be thinking about this tomorrow? And am I going to be thinking about it a month from now? And if the answer to any of those is no, I immediately ask myself, why am I spending so much time in my head about this right now when there's so many other things I can be experiencing?
Dude, from your lips to God's ears, man. That is really good, and I think a lot of us need to hear that. So maybe may that penetrate the hearts and minds of the listeners, including the host. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you, and I'm glad for your folks reaching out. They were responsible for connecting me with a Robert C. Smith, MD. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he is trying to bring mental health back into primary care, and it was an outstanding interview, as was this one. So, thanks to Evan also. Appreciate you, and again, on behalf of our Noggin Notes family and our Zephyr Wellness family. Please share this around if you like it. We wish you all great mental wellness. Bye bye.